Greetings from Las Vegas for CareTalk's third annual HLTH conference interview series. Randomized clinical trials are the gold standard, but they only apply to that contrived subset of patients who participate, leaving an evidence gap when it comes to the real world. Atropos Health is using real-world evidence to close those gaps with patient-specific prognostograms using real-world data. Brigham Hyde...
What?
It sounds like something you don't want in your you-know-what, but Brigham Hyde is CEO of Atropos. Welcome to CareTalk, America's home for incisive debate about healthcare business and policy, and now a top 5 healthcare podcast. I'm David Williams, president of Health Business Group.
And I'm John Driscoll, the president of Walgreens Health. Welcome, Brigham. What is the real world like? David's been wondering what it would be like to visit.
It's digital. It's like the metaverse. It's evidence-based. It's all these great things. I think it's something we're used to in every other part of our life. You buy car insurance, the quote's tailored for you, on down. And I think that's been late to come to healthcare. We know we protect data differently in healthcare for good reason. But we think we're at the beginning of a wave now where you could, crazy idea, look at patients just like you that have had care in the past, see how they did.
Lots of care.
Lots of care, all the
Thanks,
care.
John. You've had lots of CareCentrics.
Exactly.
So, how well is data being used in healthcare today? There's been a lot that's collected. It used to be on paper. Now it's electronic. Are we using it well for patient care?
Well, I think that's a really good question, David. Maybe we go back to your premise and maybe Brigham, you could explain, I think most people think that a randomized clinical trial, the gold standard, which is always it's always a comma gold standard, would include everything. What do you mean it doesn't include everything that is encompassed in what you're trying to bring? And then maybe we go to your more wonky question, David, and we can go geek out on that. But I do think it's really important that people understand what's in and what's out, and yet, what's out can really affect patients and clinical outcomes.
Yeah, let's talk about randomized control trials for a second. And I just want to say I'm a card-carrying member of, the clinical trial community. I have a PhD in clinical pharmacology. I've been trained in this stuff. I believe in the importance of that and all the innovation that came out of the 20th century that enabled us to have a great regulatory process that's supported by evidence. But here's a fact. 75% of patients in the US are excluded from clinical trials at a base level. And that 75% receives 80% of the care. So the very clinical trials we're using to shape care exclude the people that it's shaping it for.
Are they consciously excluded? Because can David exclude me from a trial?
Oh, John, please, yes. The answer is yes to that, but I don't think that generalizes.
You guys may have your own IRB for that. But no, look, if you're designing a clinical trial, you want to remove background signals. You want to get a pure signal of the efficacy and safety of a therapy or an approach. And so you tend to exclude people who have other diseases or comorbid, for instance, or of rare or populations that have more problematic backgrounds. And, you're wanting to do that for good reasons. It's not bad intent necessarily. But the fact of the matter is most patients these days in the US are comorbid with something. Diabetics get cancer. Who knew? You know what I mean? And I think trying to solve for that problem, let's talk about what that leaves physicians with for a second. So I'm a physician. I have that diabetic in my office. I'm trying to make a decision on a cancer therapy for them. And I look to see if diabetics were included in the trial and they weren't. And I'm kind of guessing that it's going to be okay. I'm extrapolating. Doctors do this every single day for their patients. And there are risks. Like what if, because they're diabetic, it leads to end-stage renal disease? I'm here to treat cancer and they need a kidney transplant now because I didn't have evidence for my therapy. But it's just the state of play, or has been for the better part of 40 years, despite investments in data and infrastructure.
And I think that the reason this is so important and so foundational and what you're working on is so exciting is that control trial structure that you're talking about, A/B testing, reducing the signals versus the noise in the data by simplifying the number of participants, patients with a particular condition, it was very good for the 20th century, and it is the basis of every new therapy, every new drug, every biologic, every new device. That's you have to get through that gate to get through FDA approval. So what's changed that you can actually include stuff that isn't currently sort of if you want, a purer form of the clinical condition you're trying to solve for, whether it's an arthritic knee or a complex cancer condition.
Yeah, let me blow through 30 years of innovation here and sum it up simply.
You may have to slow it down for Dave, but you roll the way you want.
Meaningful use, right? The High-Tech Act, we start to force people to record things in electronic form, medical records. That's stage one. Stage two, cloud infrastructure. A lot of data is now stored in that infrastructure, and that means you can analyze it and do things to it. Privacy, largely solved, I would argue, not completely out of the woods, but things like de-identification, statistical de-identification, technologies like Datavant and others, it's safer than it once was to do this. Now we're at the next leg of innovation. I think Atropos is right in the center of this, which is, okay, so I have the data, it's in the cloud, I want to analyze it, but I have to do it fast because I have to be able to respond to that physician in the flow of care. It can't take a month and a half to do a study. Patient's already gone, right? Big innovation of Atropos, which was developed at Stanford by Dr. Nigam Shah, was, hey, I need this to feel to the doctor like I'm consulting a colleague. I'm just consulting the data and informatics to do it. And the technology innovation, which we licensed, enables that speed. So I can answer a question which would have taken months for somebody to do in a single day.
So what is a prognostogram other than something I threatened John with for bad behavior?
Prognostogram is the report we deliver back that answers a question. All I need from a physician is a couple sentences. Again, just like they were emailing a colleague, like, hey, I've got a diabetic who also has melanoma. Can I give them Keytruda? Is there a problem with end-stage renal disease? Tell me the answer. I get that. My team and my technology will respond to that in a day with this report called the prognostogram. The report is a full-blown observational research study, the type that are published every day, the type that the FDA uses to advise their own clinical trial process. It's got all the statistics, analyses, descriptions of the data, and up top, a summary. Turns out you can give Keytruda to these patients. It will be safe. Maybe you should have some renal monitoring. And that answer is delivered back by our service by clinicians. They call them up and say, hey, here's what it says. Factor this into your decision-making. It's personalized to that patient in front of you, and you can make an informed care choice. By the way, in that question example, on thousands of patients, the single largest study ever run on Keytruda in diabetics was produced in one day by us.
And this is more than just a report, right? Some of these are actually become peer-reviewed articles that are published. Is that right?
Yeah, dozens of them. Essentially, somebody just takes the report, writes an introduction, conclusion, submits for peer review, and they go on to be published.
But when you think about that, if we've got one world where the data is clean, it's brought up in these controlled trials, get the A/B testing, where are you getting all the other data that's outside of the stuff that gets outside of the data and the studies, phase 1 through 3 that get things approved by the FDA?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a point now, again, 10 years plus on from meaningful use. We have strong longitudinal records in the form of EMR, in the form of claims, socio-determinants of health. Even some of the clinical trial repositories can be reused for this. And for us, we like to sit on whatever the relevant data is. If that's the data at your institution, great. If it's a specialty oncology data set like ASCO CancerLink, one of our partners, great. If you want to know the answer on Mayo data, we can provide that, right? So we're trying to sit on that infrastructure that's developed in these great longitudinal records. By the way, there'll be new types of data. There'll be your Fitbit. All this stuff will come in. We're just the speed to answer and the rigor on the statistical analyses to do it.
And just so folks remember, meaningful use was the massive investment that was at bipartisan support in creating a standard data, at least recording infrastructure, and where meaningful use was the name for that. But what's interesting is we're also with the Office of National Healthcare Infrastructure, blah blah blah, the ONC. You probably remember how to.
Yeah, I remember Mickey Tripathi. Yeah, ONCHIT. It's very weird though. It's like you wish you could have a job with the title coordinator. That's the top guy in the whole government, Mickey Tripathi on healthcare.
Or the whole shooting match. But they are moving towards even more standardized. Standard called FHIR, FHIR, and Smart FHIR, which would allow much more interoperability, which would actually, I think, allow you access to even more information than you have today.
100%. And that's part of the bet we're making. I mean, I've built other businesses in this space. I founded Concert AI, the oncology real-world data space. We're a competitor of Flatiron. And it used to have to do was go gather data and enrich it, and then pile it up, and then you'd have a business, essentially. With the ONC rule and new technologies surrounding that, data fluidity, data transactability is here to stay. And it's no longer about like, I got to get the best little data rock I can find. Instead, it's what do I add?
Which historically was the only data rock you could find.
Whatever, however jagged it was. But yeah, I mean, that was the old model. I think the new model is layering on top of this data transactability. So assume everybody can get all the data. What do we need on top of that in terms of applications to drive insight and action, and in our case, evidence? And how do we make it more personalized? And that's our goal, to live on that ecosystem.
Are you programming your own unique algorithms to sort of pull more out from more sources to drive more insights? Or is this just taking the original algorithm that come out of the trials and sort of making it more precise and substantial?
Yeah, let me try my shot at like the AI BuzzFeed word game here. So
David
what
will take
do,
you down, don't you worry.
Perfect. And then look, AI is fantastic and going to do amazing things, but we're more on the inferential statistics side. We're almost old school. We're like the clinical trial
Most of the
folks.
AI actually is more I than...
I didn't say it, you said it. Okay, so what we try and do is answer a discrete study question like you would in a clinical trial, and we'll use the appropriate statistical techniques. Some of them might be considered machine learning, but it's different depending on the question. And we publish our methods on this. All this is published. It's all transparent. No black box. If you want to go in and see how we did it, you can see how we do it. And what we do that's closest to AI is we use things called high dimensional propensity score matching. Why is that important? What is that? That is a way of removing confounding bias. So the reason everybody loves clinical trials is because they're randomized. We can avoid equipoise, which is the situation where a doctor might stick their buddy in one arm of a trial because it's the better arm and their enemy in the other one, right? That's why you do.
I wouldn't do that, John. I wouldn't do it to you. I wouldn't do it to my worst co-host.
Arm one and arm two of the study here. But, that's something you cannot have randomization really in real world data, but you can use the best techniques to remove that confounding. And, we do that at the cutting edge. And so this gets back to, a little bit of data versus trials and what's important. First of all, I believe you need both. But the real answer to that is, how often do clinical trials replicate each other? So if I get a clinical trial result, let me rerun it. Does it replicate itself? The rate's about 70 to 75% of the time.
It's not great, which is remarkable given the structure.
It's also not surprising if you know the way trials are designed and deployed and you're in the weeds of that, but it's a little bit sad. But let's just say that's the gold standard, right? Well, we published a study that showed bronze standard. We published a study there. We took 1,000 of those studies and we replicated them in real world data. Guess how often we replicated the results? 70 to 75% of the time. So I think we're at this point where clinical trials, critical role in our regulatory path, will continue to go forward. And I'm excited about decentralized trials and the digital enrollment, things like Amy Abernathy's working on it, Verily, multiple others. All great from my perspective. Let's also use the data we've been collecting for 10 years, use great methods, be transparent, and bring it to the physicians.
So, David, why do you keep arguing with him about this?
So I think it's an exciting time. So we've got the data, we've got the interoperability, we've got what Nikki Tripathi from ONC calls interactivity. So it's not just that you can
3 times quickly.
Nikki Tripathi. I give you a bonus, John. Okay, remember that. And so now the data, the technology, the methods are ready. It's certainly something I would want as a patient. But, is the healthcare system ready for it? Is the payment system ready for it? And what does that mean to you as a business?
And how do you get paid?
Oh, John, they just file a claim, just like you do. You fill the script and you file it and boom.
Well, hold on. We are actually qualified for reimbursement. There are new CPT codes put out by CMS about 4 years ago.
I need a code for that. Could I get reimbursed for that?
Maybe. And both the ordering physician and us can get reimbursed. It's under the consult codes they created about spending time reviewing patient information. That's what we're doing. And it's a great model, particularly if you're a community doc, your GP. Like, this is a way to, if you're going to spend time reviewing this stuff, make a couple extra bucks. By the way, the ROI on all this is excellent. Leads to better outcomes across the board. So,
and so how does let's say you're a parent with a kid with a chronic condition with a couple of comorbidities, and I want to make sure we're taking care of as that my kid gets through adolescence and becomes a young adult, is taking advantage of not just what's in the trial, because often that's not aimed at the kid, it's aimed at the particular group they had at that time, and kids are going through different periods of physical and biological changes. How do I get access to better information? Can I ask for someone to use your service?
Yeah, I mean, so pediatrics are a great example, right? Back to clinical trials. Guess we don't do a lot of pediatric trials or a lot of geriatric trials, David. But
think about that old guy.
Listen, I'll tell you what, he's gotten the theme of the show.
Oh, sorry. I was just chiming in.
But let me just be clear. The host is supposed to pick on the host. If the guest picks on
Extra points.
If the guest picks on the host,
we're going to promote it twice as much.
Yeah, but no, old guys, that was some sort of you could probably include real world data that an old guy could say Mickey Tripathi name at least 4 times fast, perhaps more.
That's right.
But getting back to the point, David,
he was trying to answer the question, or was he trying to insult me? I got lost in my elder fog.
You can do both.
Okay.
Yeah. So where do you get to it? At atropohealth.com, you can request a prognostogram through there. Right now, we route you back to your physician. We want them involved. But I think there is a direct-to-patient story at some point. I think it fits in this virtual care discussion we're all having this week. And, we want that throughout that child's life. There should be multiple questions that need to be answered along the way, especially when there's a key treatment decision or a side effect risk. And again, our job is to bring that to you transparently, great methods, great data, and speed. And then it's for you and your physician to discuss and figure out how to interpolate for your child.
So last question, perhaps the most remarkable thing about the company is that a Stanford company somehow seemed to get a UCSF digital award. How did that happen?
Yeah, we thought we had no shot, but thank you to the awards committee. We did win last night. Super exciting week for us as a company. Also announced our partnership with Mayo Clinic. We're super excited about it.
That's awesome. I mean, UCSF does give a lot of awards away, though.
It's the gold standard of award, I would say, because it's very rigorous in judging and took a lot of time and effort, but we're super proud of it. It's great as a young company to get recognized.
And congratulations on the partnership with Mayo. That's a big move as well.
Yeah, incredibly exciting. It also, we get to work closely with John Halamka, Manish Goyal on the Mayo Care platforms. This whole digital story, right? And being able to go with that platform as it brings the Mayo brand of care out and be the pointy tip of the spear, be the thing that can respond day one and, provide these consults to people. I think super exciting.
You definitely don't want to be the blunt end of the spear.
No.
Which end of the spear do you want to be, John? In any case, that's it for yet another episode of CareTalk. We're here in Las Vegas, the 3rd annual HLTH conference interview series. We've been speaking today with Brigham Hyde about prognostograms, among other things. He is the CEO of Atropos Health. I'm David Williams, president of Health Business Group.
And I'm John Driscoll, the president of Walgreens Health. Whether you liked what you heard or you didn't, we'd like you to subscribe on your favorite service. Thanks for joining us today, Brigham.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. It's really fun.